I was excited when I found out my favorite VR game, Into the Radius, was releasing on the Oculus Quest 2. The Quest is the most popular VR headset by far. Most people that own one don't also have a powerful gaming PC capable of running these VR titles. So the game being accessible to more people means more players can potentially experience this beautiful game. That being said, I was a bit skeptical at first. The Quest 2 is great, and it's my headset of choice at the moment, but there's no denying that its hardware has aged quite a bit over the years. However, I was given beta access to the Quest version before it was released, and was extremely impressed by what I saw. The game is out now on the Quest store, so I thought I would do a comparison between the PCVR version and the Quest, in case anyone interested in playing it was wondering what they would be missing out on with the Quest version in terms of graphics and gameplay mechanics. We'll start with mechanics since there aren't many differences at all. This is a very well made port, and for the most part the entire game is here with no sacrifices to gameplay. There are only a few minor things I noticed that I thought I would mention. The first thing you might notice is that there's no full body IK on the Quest version, just floating hands. This means you can't inject your arm or any other body part with the syringe to heal, you need to stab your hands. It's honestly not a big deal in the end, you get used to it quickly, but it's worth noting. The PC version lets you choose between the full body or floating hands. I always play with the full body just because I prefer to have a body in VR whenever possible, but on the Quest version, once I was in the game, I mostly forgot about the fact that I had no arms. The flashlight won't stay powered on when it leaves your hand, so you can't leave it powered on and place it somewhere in the environment to free up a hand while you loot. You also can't place it in your side pocket powered on, although I'm not sure if this is a bug in the PC version because it kinda eliminates the point of the chest flashlights. In the end, it's not a big deal because you unlock the head torch early in the game at security level 2, which eliminates the need to use the flashlight in this way. Next, it feels very difficult to pull items off my body while moving. Here you can see a clip of me failing to grab a mag off my body while being attacked, and I had to fully stop to be able to properly grab it. This clip also highlights another problem I saw. It seems the items are way more susceptible to falling through the ground in the Quest version. Items falling through the ground is a rare occurrence on PC, but it seems to be more common in the Quest version. That being said, those last two things are most likely bugs that can be fixed in a future update and not limitations of the Quest hardware, so I'm not too worried about it. Overall, the developers did a great job of faithfully porting over all the game's mechanics to the Quest version. And the very few limitations I noticed are extremely minor and can easily be ignored during the regular gameplay. Next, let's talk graphics. This is where most of the noticeable differences will be since the Quest's graphics power is a lot lower than the average gaming PC that can run these VR games. After loading into the game, I was extremely impressed by the resolution and frame rate. I couldn't find any information online at what frame rate the game runs at, but I'm willing to bet it's 90 because of how buttery smooth it felt. Speaking of frame rate, when enemies are far enough away, the frame rate of their animations will be decreased to save on resources. This is a clever trick I've seen before in video games with many NPCs or enemies on screen. Since the player will most likely be looking at things closer to them, it's hard to notice the decreased FPS of farther away NPCs unless you're specifically looking for it. Here you can see a mimic running with a very low frame rate, and here's an example of a spawn's frame rate increasing as it got closer to me. The textures and 3D model quality are a lot lower, except in certain cases where I'd say they're equally as good as the PC version. Let me explain that. In general, the textures are lower resolution in the Quest version, but all items, guns, and interactable environment stuff seem to still be at full res, as well as a few other specific things like posters around the main hub. Same goes for 3D models. All of the items that you can pick up like guns and ammo boxes look equal to the PC version, but stuff in the environment that can't be interacted with does look generally lower poly than the PC version. There's also a lot more visual clutter and scenery elements in the PC version. The main hub looks barren compared to the PC version. This can be considered a very slight gameplay difference in some scenarios. For example, this car at the factory I took cover behind in my live stream straight up doesn't exist in the Quest version, so I wouldn't have been able to hide behind it if I got into that same fight. And this room filled with desks and items from one of my famous shorts is completely barren in the Quest version. It's pretty minor overall, but still worth mentioning. Another graphical change that's pretty obvious if you played the PC version is the render distance. The render distance is definitely lower in the Quest version. Not much to talk about here, it was a pretty necessary change to get the game running well. It seems like some objects have less render distance than others. For example, you can see me taking a step forward and backwards here to load and unload these solidified people. However, enemies seem to stay loaded at the full extent of your vision, and that's the most important thing you want to see from a distance anyways. Same goes for shadows. The shadow quality is greatly reduced in the Quest version to the point where there's basically no shadows at all. This was an obvious change the developers had to make, and normally I wouldn't care about this too much. There's a lot of cross-platform VR games that do the same thing. However, this one still saddens me a little because the shadows in Into the Radius add so much atmosphere to the game, and makes it feel a lot more immersive. The environments feel so much brighter and less scary without the shadows, and it makes the lower texture environments feel even more watered down. The enemies seem to have very minor, almost unnoticeable downgrades. Other than the animation and frame rate stuff I mentioned earlier, the shards seem to be less translucent on the quest, and armored enemies seem to be less shiny and reflecty. The shards looked weirdly gray and lower quality in the beta. Here's a clip I took from back then, but in the current version they look just like the PC version, so I'm glad they figured that one out. Other than that, all the enemies look pretty identical to the PC version. There's a few other minor things I noticed, such as this area not giving off that ominous green glow that it does in the PC version. The monitors in your room and the train don't have that old worn out looking texture applied on top. The floating ash particles are still present, which I love, but there's less in the Quest version. And that's about all the differences between the games that I've noticed. CM Games did an amazing job with the Quest version. I'm impressed they managed to get this pseudo open world game running on the Quest hardware at all, never mind at full resolution with a smooth frame rate. Of course, if you do have a capable PC, I'd recommend playing that version, but if you only have a Quest, then you won't be missing out on much at all by playing that version. The game is cross-buy on the Oculus Store too, so you'll get both the PC and Quest versions when you buy the game. I hope this helped anyone that was curious about the difference between the two versions. Have a good rest of your day.